This is my favorite part, when you finally get to just sit down and be out here in solitude. It seems like all the great mysteries that are out in the woods, you know, that awesomeness that people who love nature, they're like, oh, I gotta get that, I gotta go out and feel those feelings, and I feel so right when I'm out in nature, I feel so alive, right? Well, I've learned that you really need to go about that in solitude. You limit yourself by doing it with a group of people or a friend. Most of the very incredible things that have happened to me in the woods that are even sometimes hard to even explain or put into words, they happen when you're by yourself. And it seems like when you reach a quiet place inside your mind, that's when the ideas and the little secrets start to come out. The forest begins to teach you about where to walk, which way you should go, what you should try and make. And when you learn to move slowly, very slowly, and walk in a respectful manner, then you really start getting the gifts and the treasures that nature has to offer. It's very tough for us because in our fast-paced modern world, we move very quickly and we always have a big to-do list. But when you get out in the woods and you shed all of that and you fill yourself with empty, you feel changed. You start to settle into what I think we're supposed to live like. When I first learned how to move in the forest so that you're kind of like invisible, when I first learned what I've come to learn as the routine of invisibility, I spent a lot of time just slowly walking, soaking it all in. And I remember those adventures. They've been so neat because sometimes it'll take you 2, maybe 3 hours to walk 100 yards. And so many times when you're moving that slowly and you're looking and listening and feeling and smelling and hearing everything around you, you get to the point where you don't want to move because you might disturb your invisibility. So you begin thinking about moving. You don't think about moving. You begin thinking about moving. That's how I like to describe it. And that's when you get the real gems. That's when birds start to land on you. Or coyotes walk up to you. Or you have a baby fawn, a white-tailed fawn, so close that you can touch it. Or you can scratch your fingers down the back of a grouse as it stands on its drumming log. Or in that silence and in that slow movement, you suddenly find yourself in the mountains, purposefully putting yourself in the path of 7 wolves in a wolf pack, waiting for them to come upon you. Because you feel like that's what you were supposed to do. Yeah, that's a story for another time. But yeah. And gazing into the eyes of wolves as they stand there checking you out, 7 of them. You can't find that kind of stuff racing around quickly. You gotta slow down. You got to be silent. You got to move quietly. I went on a silent and slow walk one November. It was the first real cold snap of the year here in Alberta. And for the most part I stood still. And every so often I'd take a few steps. Sometimes I'd get down and crawl in the fresh snow, weave my way through the grasses just like a weasel or a mouse. I spent 3 hours working my way up a creek, mostly standing still. All around me, up in the hills and the trees, because it was the first cold snap of the year and it was close to 30 below Celsius. The trees, which had all the moisture in them, began popping and exploding. And the hoarfrost was everywhere. It was just growing and growing. And, as it got colder, the hoarfrost grew out off the branches. I made it a goal of mine to see if I could look into the woods at the exact moment that a tree popped, and maybe my gaze would be fixed on it as it popped, and I could see it shake and shudder with all the hoarfrost and the moonlight. So on that journey towards that goal, I eventually found myself at a beaver pond. And I climbed out onto the ice. And I climbed up onto the top of the beaver lodge. It was right in the center, surrounded by ice. All these tracks were coming and going to that beaver lodge. And I laid down there just to listen to the trees pop, propped up in such a way that I was kind of leaning like this and I could see into the forest, hear all the popping, in hopes of seeing one of those trees explode. And after a short while of laying there, I started to hear something coming. Little tracks, little footprints coming up across the ice towards the beaver lodge. I heard it off to my left, and I thought, this is awesome. There's an animal coming towards me. I had this stick in my hands, laying on the back of the beaver lodge, and it was around 30 below. Trees were popping, the moon was out. I'm laying there thinking, awesome. Maybe some animal like a fox or a coyote is going to come up really close. Maybe it'll sniff my ear or sniff me, and I'll get to see it up close. So I just hunkered in and I sat quietly. I tried to keep my heart in check and quiet my mind so that all I did was sit there trying to be motionless and invisible. And then the sound stopped. I didn't hear anything anymore. And I thought, uh-oh, where'd it go? It's got to be just down off the side of the beaver lodge. Where'd it go? And after a few moments, I felt something on my hood starting to touch me and rub me back here. Some small movement. Well, that was it. I can honestly say I got scared at that point, because there I was laying on this beaver lodge, well into the evening, and something was touching my head. So I thought, I've got to do something. So with one quick motion, I jumped to my feet, and I looked down and I had this stick in my hand. In the moonlight, I looked down, and there on the beaver lodge, right where my head was a dead mouse. A dead mouse. Now how could a dead mouse be touching my head? It seems so weird that a dead mouse could actually do that. I mean, it was dead, right? So I just stared at it, and I kept thinking, a dead mouse, a dead mouse, a dead mouse. How can a dead mouse touch my head? And just then a weasel came up out of the holes in the wood and stuff, and it poked its head up, and it looked right up at me in the moonlight, and it went, and it gave me this huge hiss, and then it grabbed the mouse, and then it disappeared down a hole under the branches. Obviously I was laying on top of its entrance and exit hole. So anyways, I calmed down and laid back down again, and then as I laid there thinking about the beavers that were inside the lodge underneath me, and the weasel and the mouse and all the animals that were there and that place that I was in, you know, I was just overcome with amazement that I could be having such an experience in such a beautiful place. So many people run and hide in fear of that cold, and there I was, lavishly flourishing in it and feeling so alive, having these adventures. In the silence of that place, I looked up into the hillside across the ice, and I was looking at this great big old aspen tree. And just as I looked at it, it cracked. And I saw it in the moonlight. The whole tree shuddered, and the branches shook up high. This big sharp crack went off. And then all the hoarfrost that had built on the branches started to fall down to earth, reflecting in the moonlight. It was like jewels, just falling down, little stars falling down the earth. You have to overcome your fear of dark. You have to overcome your fear of wild animals. You have to overcome your fear of spending a night in the bush alone. You have to overcome your fear of walking 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 miles into the woods and finding your way back out. Getting off the trails and going wherever you like. And you got to do it by yourself. You want to do it safely. Know your area. Carry the means to navigate so you can get out. But you really got to do those things by yourself. And then you'll start collecting stories. Amazing, adventurous stories that nobody else could collect. You got to move slow, and you got to let yourself go of trying to get somewhere and have to be there and have to do something, and you just have to relax. Lose your mind and come to your senses, as John Young says. So anyways, it's getting close to midnight on day 1, and there is a moon, but it's not super bright. In any case, I'm going to throw on a coat and go for a walk out on the lake and just go for a tour around and see what I can see, because I can, because I'm here, and time doesn't matter here. It doesn't matter if it's midnight. I'm walking in the woods. I have a warm fire and a shelter, a place to come back to. I can keep myself hydrated, it's all good.